It feels like crypto is legal again. It just went from being, persona non grata to welcome at the party again. It's for criminals and drug dealers, to blockchain, not Bitcoin, to I believe in Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation, basically. Like that's, what we've gone through over the past 10 years. It is kind of an amazing place to arrive.
Legislative activities start to ramp up again. And instead of following, I think the US is going to lead this time around.
It means something if you count in dollars. If you count in Bitcoin, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin.
The reason I think it does matter is it signifies that the Bitcoin has become something that is impossible to ignore.
The idea of Bitcoin and crypto in general being positive for individuals and for everyone is more a common idea. And this is new. We can see that regulators will be more smooth and try to organize things in order to really protect users, not to push any kind of political agenda.
I consistently predicted throughout 2024 that Trump would win. One of the things that I was surprised by was the scale of his win.
My career arc from Beastie Boys webmaster to Ledger completed the cycle when I sat in a room with Kid Rock and Donald Trump this summer. Security of your Instagram account really matters if your business relies on Instagram, which many, many, many businesses do. Pretty much every day in our life, we're interacting with some kind of good enough security with some applications, whether that's, a file that someone has sent you or those photos that you're sharing with a link that isn't protected, etc.
When I show them the new devices and explain some of the new capabilities, they start to see them and us, I think, as something more than just crypto.
Last cycle was really about NFT. The one before was around ICO. This year, 2025, will be really, really big on meme coins.
You see some very sophisticated hacks that make a few $100,000. Meanwhile, hijacking a Twitter account can deliver millions.
I think 2025 will be the year where states will adopt Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, and then there will be some FOMO cycle, and we will see this big supply shock.
Ian, one more prediction. I'm going to bring you back to DC, do some more rounds on the Hill, and continue to evangelize self-custody and why it's important. I think our moment has arrived.
Hello and welcome to Ledger's special end of the year podcast. As we look back on an incredibly eventful 2024 in the world of crypto, there's so much to talk about. From Bitcoin's exciting climb towards 100K and the leaps we've made in security, to the influence of institutional investors, and obviously the impact of the US elections, this year has been a roller coaster. While we don't have a crystal ball just yet, we will share some pragmatic analysis and thoughtful predictions for 2025, and I have to say that we're excited to explore what the future might hold for Bitcoin and the crypto world altogether. Today, we're joined by three of our favorite guests from Ledger: Ian Rogers, Chief Experience Officer, Charles Guillemet, Chief Technology Officer, and Seth Herlein, Ledger's Global Head of Policy. They'll share their experiences and perspectives, helping us understand where we've been and where we might be headed. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation.
Hey everybody, my name's Ian Rogers and I am the Chief Experience Officer here at Ledger. And we're doing a year-end 2024 podcast for you today. We're going to talk about what happened this year and what's coming in 2025. This is just an incredible moment in crypto. Overall, it's a great moment for Ledger, and we're excited. And we want to talk to you a little bit about what we've seen in 2024, because it's been quite a year, and what we're thinking going into 2025. I'm joined today by Seth Herlein and Charles Guillemet. Give us a couple seconds, guys. How long have you been at Ledger, and what do you do here?
Thanks, Ian. My name's Seth Herlein. I lead global policy for Ledger, which means I'm responsible for keeping track of all of the different legislative and regulatory proposals happening around the world that in fact could impact crypto and particularly self-custody. And I've been doing that for Ledger since beginning of 2022, so coming up on 3 years.
And what did you do before?
Before, very similar, I led policy and government relations for the Stellar Development Foundation. Before that, spent a long time in traditional financial services policy in Washington, D.C. And before that was a securities regulator.
Amazing. Charles?
My name is Charles Guillemet. I'm CTO at Ledger, so I'm in charge of technology. And I joined Ledger 2 Bitcoin cycles before, at the end of the year 2017.
And what did you do before?
Before, I was busy trying to create security solutions based on secure hardware or trying to break them. It would be a fair summary.
So both of you guys have very boring jobs at a very boring moment in history, I know. But we're going to try to, keep the audience entertained. Now, I'm kidding, obviously. I mean, it's like when thinking about exactly what you guys do, each of you, at this moment in time, and just what incredible moments to be doing what each of you do. And also, I think you probably agree, we're at this this transition period. Let's talk about what 2024 has been like for you. And I'll go first as a bit of a setup, because launching Stacks and Flex into the market this year for me was cathartic. We announced Ledger Stacks back in December of 2022 with the intention of shipping it in March of 23, and that March became May became July, and August our supplier decided that they couldn't get it done and went out of business, and we scrambled to find more solutions. We got the product into the market this year in May, and then we managed to stand on stage in Nashville at Bitcoin Nashville in July, and not only announced that Stacks was shipping and on order, but also that we had a new product at a lower price point, Ledger Flex. So now here we are, we're sitting here just having had an extraordinary Black Friday where we actually get responses on both of those products from our audience. And I'll just speak for myself as somebody whose job it was to help get those products in the market. It feels like night and day. Now we get, it feels like crypto is legal again. If I may, it's like we just went from being, persona non grata to welcome at the party again. It's amazing. When I was running Beats Music and Apple Music, and I was Chief Digital Officer at LVMH, everybody wanted to be my friend. Something seemed to happen into 2022, and the conversations got a little heavier. But here that conversation has shifted again. So that's what I've felt. What about you two? What's 2024 been like for you?
When you said crypto is legal again, I'm not sure it was legal before. In the meaning that you said. Back in the days, Bitcoin was for a criminal organization and drug dealer. That was really the mainstream idea. And
whoa. Going back to when? like 2009.
No, 2016. Everyone was talking when mainstream media, when regulation was talking about Bitcoin. They were referring to criminal organization and money laundering. That was the idea. That was not the case.
Come on, Seth. We were hearing this in DC this year. Again, people repeating the same idiotic refrain. Let's be honest.
Well, but my point was what time period was that referring to? Yes, they're still talking about it, but it's referring to the first couple of years up to maybe 2013 with Silk Road, and then after that, that's not at all been the case.
Well, it definitely hasn't been the case, but people have been saying it.
It wasn't the case, but people were saying it. After that. There was this idea that blockchain was a good technology, but not crypto. That was the case around 19, I think. And now I think the idea of Bitcoin and crypto in general being positive for individuals and for everyone is more a common idea. And this is new. When you say crypto is legal again, this is really what I hear. And now we can see that regulators will be like more smooth and try to organize things in order to really protect users, not to push any kind of political agenda. I think this is what really changed this year. And yes, you also mentioned the different devices that we released this year with Flex and Stacks. And those devices are really different, and they enable plenty of new things. And this is something that we see with more and more value on-chain. We see more and more sophisticated attacks. And having a nice screen in order to provide users with all the information so that he can consent for a transaction or not is something that is really important. And this is something that is brought by these new devices. And also we have worked on privacy. We launched a protocol that enabled privacy for users that is called Keyring Protocol. So plenty of new things that have been built this year.
Yeah, and those bigger screens are important in this cycle because we're signing things that are more complex, more and more often, right? Maybe I think there's also a big change here in that if we look at the change between 2021 cycle and this cycle, the 2020-2021 cycle and this cycle, you've also got you've got more block space, more L2s coming on Bitcoin. Like you have this kind of explosion of complexity, which requires a larger screen.
Yeah, totally. At the beginning, interacting with blockchain was mostly interacting with Bitcoin. After that, we started to have like logic on-chain with Ethereum, and the main use case was really like ERC20, send and receive, and sending a coin or receiving a coin was well supported on Ledger devices from the beginning. But now you are interacting with protocols that are living on-chain, and this is something that is not completely new. But the fact that these protocols are getting more traction and more importance on-chain is new. Now you have like billions of dollars that are locked in these protocols, and interacting with a protocol means that executing a smart contract, and you are executing this smart contract from your wallet. So on your wallet, you will sign a transaction that is that is running a smart contract. So having the ability to understand what kind of program you will run is something a little bit new, and this is why having a wider screen is important for users so that they understand what kind of program they are running on chain.
Seth, how was your year?
The other super cool thing about the new devices, Ledger Flex and Ledger Stacks, that I always bring up when I'm showing them to policymakers is the ability for the new devices to serve as an authentication device. So using it with Ledger Security Key, which is based on the FIDO2 standard, and the ability to hold and store passkeys, unlocks for the first time a sort of cryptographic, right? Not cryptocurrency, but cryptographic use case for the devices, and allows them to be your 2FA for when you sign into to different accounts, your X account, your Google account, whatever. And policymakers are really interested by that. When I show them the new devices and explain some of the new capabilities, they start to see them and us, I think, as something more than just crypto, which is encouraging.
It's a great point, because if you really zoom out and think, okay, what's happening? We're leading more and more digital lives, and security is already a challenge in our life. We think about security around digital assets, but security of your Instagram account really matters if your business relies on Instagram, which many, many, many businesses do at this point. Security of your enterprise. When I started at LVMH in 2015, I couldn't get anyone at the executive committee of LVMH to talk to me about cybersecurity broadly for the company. But more recently, I've even had Bernard Arnault say, what do you think of the cybersecurity protection that we have here at LVMH? Because they had some incidents over the years where their businesses were actually threatened by cybersecurity breaches. And really, it's always been true about Ledger that what is, absolutely unique about it is it's the only operating system and development platform on top of smart card technology on the world. And yes, great use case for that is protecting digital assets, but also, security key and protecting your passwords is another. But there's also no reason that Ledger couldn't be used as the security device to erase a lot of the really clumsy user experience from your crypto exchange that comes from needing, security assurances or other applications. I mean, pretty much every day in our life, we're interacting with some like kind of good enough security with some applications, whether that's, a file that someone has sent you or those photos that you're sharing with a link that isn't protected, et cetera. So, really great point about the Ledger Security Key Protocol. I think, the other thing for me is when we move into an era of AI, it's clear that this gets worse. A lot of what, people want to do is simply not going to be possible without agentic without users owning their preferences. A lot of agentic AI things, simply won't be possible. So we're going to need this, elevated security, more ownership for users in all cases. And I think, a lot of the kind of we're just used to spam, bots, et cetera. A lot of these problems that could be solved with the type of, to your point, cryptographic things that you could do with the ledger, and not only the cryptocurrency things you could do. On the policy front, Seth, what have you been focused on in 2024?
Yeah, so 2024 was really a reset year. So 2024 was the year that the democratic world really went to the polls. There's some astronomical percentage of the global population that voted in elections this year. We really here at Ledger, we really focused on three. First was the EU elections in the first half of the year. And then the UK election over the summer, and then finally the US election just a few weeks ago. And what that meant for me really is that sort of legislative activity stopped at the end of 2023. That's when things really shifted toward the more political and the electoral process in most of our key markets. And so there wasn't a whole lot of legislation happening. There wasn't a whole lot of new rulemaking going on. And so there was sort of less to do for us on that front. But lots of things were changing as a result of these elections. And so there was a lot to keep up on and to position us for going forward. The elections had some pretty significant outcomes for crypto around the world. The EU Parliament shifted to the right. The UK Parliament shifted to the left, somewhat interestingly. And then of course, I'm sure we'll get into this more. What the U.S. Election result portends, but I think as a result of the sort of this reset year, we're going to see in 2025 legislative activity start to ramp up again, and instead of following, I think the U.S. is going to lead this time around.
But maybe a quick question for you, in 2024 was the year of ETF adoption for Bitcoin, and that was decided at the end of 2023, I think, for Ethereum ETF that was during 2024. If I understand correctly, the SEC was clearly against crypto in general. So from your standpoint, what was the trigger for the SEC to accept Bitcoin ETF and Ethereum ETF?
That's a great question. First of all, I would say they didn't accept it. The SEC was compelled by a U.S. federal court to approve the Bitcoin spot ETF application. This is because they had previously approved Bitcoin futures ETFs. And Grayscale took one for the team and litigated the refusal of the SEC to approve the spot ETF applications. And at the end of that litigation process, a federal court said, there's no meaningful difference here between the futures ETFs you already approved and the spot ETFs you are now blocking, and ordered them to approve them. And even after that federal court order, 2 of the 3 Democratic commissioners on the SEC voted no. in defiance of a federal court. So I wouldn't say that they accepted it, but they were forced to approve the applications in January, and that came as a bit of a surprise. And one of the things that I was really surprised about this year is sort of a direct result of that, and that is 2025 is really supposed to be the bull market year according to the Bitcoin cycle, and yet we hit new all-time highs in Q1 of 2024, and I think that's a direct result of the Bitcoin ETFs coming online. The ETH ETF was a different story. It wasn't exactly compelled by a court. There was sort of a threat of similar litigation if they refused it. But I think by the time they approved it over the summer, the electoral process was in full swing. Trump had sort of officially embraced crypto and made it up sort of a campaign issue for him. The Democrats' polling numbers were not looking real good. This was shortly after the sort of the disastrous debate with Biden, and then the whole hot swap of the presidential candidate on the Dem side. And I think that was an attempt by Democratic leadership to try to nullify crypto as an issue, to sort of take it off the table. It didn't work, but I think that's what was going on there. There was some scuttlebutt that sort of the order came from the White House to the SEC to approve the ETH ETFs, and so that's the way that one played out. Also, again, a bit of a surprise.
And to tie it together, I was at the DCG conference a couple weeks ago, and they started. Barry opened up with a chart basically showing the Larry Finkometer, and it echoed what Charles was saying earlier. It went from, it's for criminals and drug dealers to to blockchain, not Bitcoin, to I believe in Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation, basically. Like that's what we've gone through over the past 10 years, and it is kind of an amazing place to arrive. I'm going to share something publicly that I haven't shared up to this moment because it makes good theater, but it's also true. What I didn't count on was. So maybe a little known fact about me is that I wrote an article about an relatively unknown rapper from Michigan back in 1996 or 97 for the Beastie Boys magazine. That musician, his name is Kid Rock, and we published the article in a magazine called Ground Royal back in 1997. It was read by a guy named Jason Flom, who was running Lava Records at Atlantic at the time. Matchbox 20 was another artist on their label. He signed Kid Rock, and the rest is sort of history. There's more to the story, of course, but and then I always say it would have happened anyway, but that's the way it happened, actually. So Kid Rock is a close and very long friend, and when Bitcoin was in Nashville this summer, the plan was that we would be staying at Kid Rock's house during Bitcoin Nashville. What I didn't think of in that setup was that Donald Trump would also be in Nashville for Bitcoin Nashville, and that Donald Trump and I have a mutual friend, and he's professionally known as Kid Rock. So I did find myself in a room this summer, in a room that included not only Billy Ray Cyrus and Jake Paul, but also I was sitting directly next to Vivek Ramaswamy, and across the table from me was President-elect Donald Trump. So I would say, the singularity happened for me this summer. My career arc from Beastie Boys webmaster to Ledger completed the cycle when I sat in a room with Kid Rock and Donald Trump this summer. I'm just saying that I'm not going to share any more details from that. Plenty of people have already shared details from that meeting, but I'm just saying, yeah, that happened. Let's talk about 100K Bitcoin. What's the significance of this? Does 100K Bitcoin matter? Does it mean something? What is it?
It means something if you count in dollars. If you count in Bitcoin, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. 100K is it became like some kind of symbol, because during the last cycle there was this meme on Twitter with laser eyes on the 100K and all of this, and this is also something that is specific for crypto communities. There was this big aspect of communities and meme and so on. It's really part of it. And all these memes around the 100K made this bar special. But at the end, it's just a number, and I think the wall will collapse quickly. I think.
Yeah, so the same. I think it does and it doesn't. In the same way that did Bitcoin 1,000 or Bitcoin 10,000 mean something? I mean, it did at the time, and now it doesn't. I think this is the same. But the reason I think it does matter is it signifies that the Bitcoin has become something that is impossible to ignore, particularly for institutions, right? And so along the Larry Fink meter, it's sort of similar to the saying that first they ignore you, and then they laugh at you, and then they fight you, and then you win. I think for a long time the institutions and Wall Street and the big banks really just wanted to ignore it. Like they really did. They sort of didn't want it to exist, and they thought maybe if they ignored it long enough, it would go away on its own somehow. Clearly, that's not the case. And I think crossing 100K is a bit of a sort of planting a flag that Bitcoin is here to stay. Ignore it at your peril.
Well, I think it's also exactly along those lines. It is significant in that it might be a moment when people are forced to pay attention, because what I thought was extraordinary this year is that we could have, say, $68,000 Bitcoin, and yet it wasn't much of a story. And Bitcoin was up 100% year on year, and people were sort of like, yeah, Bitcoin's over. Like, really? An asset that's up 100% year over year seems to have some promise. Well, what conversation are we having? But to your point, 100K Bitcoin is impossible to ignore, especially because it will mean that we've eaten through that sell wall. So, Charles, every year you do predictions. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, so something interesting about this 100K bar is, whenever we will go above this threshold, the next bar is 1 million. So it creates a very wide space, and the sky is the limit then.
Exactly. Well, yes. We'll see. But the question at that point is, what gets people's attention again, right? Like what. So, I was going to ask the question, Charles. So, every year you do a prediction. What did you get right? What did you get wrong? And same question for you, Seth. And as you looked into this year, what did you think was going to happen, and how has what happened, differed from what happened in the end?
I didn't make the full list yet, but I remember around the prediction. So one was about the approval of ETF. This one was easy, and I made it. The second one was around the hash rate. I thought that despite the halving, we would see all-time high in terms of hash rate, which is not usual when you do in a halving year. Usually in a halving year, just after the halving, the hash rate decreases because miners are less profitable because the difficulty doubles. And I predicted that this time it wouldn't happen, and I was kind of. You got
that one too. I think hash rate was all-time high again yesterday.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Also, one of the prediction was around the fragmentation in the Ethereum space. It completely happened. That was expected because in the last cycle, the problem we had with Ethereum was the scalability. Ethereum is not scalable at all, and as we want to compute plenty of program on chain, having a scalable infrastructure is something important. So we decided to create different L2s that are settling on the L1, and it creates some fragmentation in liquidity, in the UX, and so on. And this is something that we are witnessing today, and this is a problem to be solved. It's not solved yet. People are working on this, but this is still a problem. One prediction where I was kind of wrong is in the Cosmos ecosystem. I really think the Cosmos technology is a good one. It's based on Tendermint and Casper consensus. All of this is really interesting from a technology standpoint. And I thought that this ecosystem would get more traction and become bigger. And this doesn't happen. This didn't happen. What happened though is the Solana traction. Because if you remember, I think like 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more, just after FTX collapse, everyone thought that Solana would collapse with FTX, and in terms of price, this is what happened to the token, to the Sol token. But the ecosystem, the community around Solana didn't stop, and now Solana is back in the business. What I didn't predict was that Ripple XRP would flip Solana and Tether, and this happened yesterday, I think. Another prediction where I was right is the fact that we would see more and more teams and companies working on ZK, and this is this is even more than what I predicted. A lot of teams are working on ZK, and this is something that will get bigger and bigger in the future.
It's a great rundown and a good setup for your predictions to come, because you nailed it pretty hard for this year. I think what you didn't predict was meme coins, and
meme coins, totally.
And I think that's an interesting one as we think about narrative, right? Because we've ICOs, NFTs, meme coins. They're all some form of the same narrative in some way, which is, how do you distribute ownership, and who what's the construct you're using to distribute ownership. But Seth, how about you? What did you get right and wrong, and specifically around the election? What did you think the odds of this outcome were at the beginning of the year relative to what we ended up with?
Yeah. Well, hi. I consistently predicted throughout 2024 that Trump would win. That's one of the predictions that I got right. And I think one of the things that I was surprised by and perhaps it got wrong was the scale of his win. Both in terms of the Electoral College margin, popular vote total, Republicans carrying both chambers of Congress, Trump winning all of the swing states. That surprised me. And it turned out to be really a repudiation by voters the politics of the last 4 years. And it turns out to be a great setup for 2025, and particularly for crypto and this industry.
What about, Seth, on the policy front globally? What's unique about your role is that a lot of the folks in your space are looking primarily at the U.S. You are looking globally. Were there things this year, predictions that you either got right or wrong on the global policy side?
Yeah, actually, I mean, it's a prediction that I got right, but but also again, sort of a surprise on scale. Looking at the other key elections that I followed, particularly the EU and the UK. I expected that politics of the right, however you want to characterize that, would be ascendant in this cycle. I think there's a general fatigue of globalist policies around the world, and we saw that play out both in the EU election, where a political group that is considered to be sort of extreme right is now the third largest political group in the EU Parliament. And even in the UK, where it was widely expected that the Labour Party would win the election and return to control of government in the UK, I think what I expected, but a lot of people didn't, was how well sort of the Reform Party did, which is Nigel Farage's sort of right-wing group that positions itself sort of to the right of the Tories or the Conservative Party. Came in a very significant third place in the UK elections, despite only picking up a few seats in Parliament due to their election rules. And then sort of the other thing that we saw there was a resistance, particularly in Europe, to sort of recognizing the success of these right parties politically, and so there have been efforts to sort of defy the election result in terms of keeping individuals or political groups out of power, despite sort of winning the election in terms of number of votes or number of seats. And I think that to me that's a bit like compressing a spring, right? Like eventually that's gonna the ability to do that is gonna go away, and that spring will release. But that's one of the trends that I saw across the elections this year. And I guess a bit of a surprise was sort of how in sync voters are globally. I think it used to be less synced, right? You could have one country sort of going this way and another country going that way. This election, and maybe going back to like 2016, I think we've really seen, particularly the transatlantic countries in particular, Europe and the U.S., the sentiment of voters generally has become more aligned, and it is shaping elections in that way. So I think that's one of the things that I got right, and but also was a bit surprised in terms of the scale of that direction.
Interesting. Let's turn to predictions now. Charles, I know you'll do your blog post at the end of the year. You're consistent, and we can count on you for it. So I'll give you time to do that. But give us a couple of big ideas that you're looking at for next year and what you think 2025 has in store.
Yes, I will go into more details, especially for the technological predictions. And I can give like three main predictions. The first one will be meme coins. Meme coins will be really, really big. I think that will be part of that might be the narrative of this cycle. Like last cycle was really about NFT and all of this. The one before was around ICO, but meme coins are in the ecosystem from the beginning. But I think like this year, 2025, will be really, really big on meme coins. The second one is around attacks. Unfortunately, I think we will see the biggest attacks in the history for blockchain technology. Unfortunately, maybe exchanges, maybe big smart contract and protocol. Because when the stakes are high, attackers are putting more resources because they think around like opportunity cost. If they can expect like 100 million as if the attack succeed, they can invest 10 millions, let's say.
And tomorrow, be a little more specific on that, Charles, because here's my curiosity. One thing I find interesting is that some of the most sophisticated hacks don't pay very well relative to some of the dumber hacks, right? In other words, you see some very sophisticated hacks that make a few $100,000. Meanwhile, hijacking a Twitter account can deliver millions. Like, what do you so I think that, but at the same time, defenses are getting better, so then they move up the stack. Like, and where do you think the ball moves to in this cycle from a security perspective?
Yeah, it's a good one. And again, opportunity cost, if it's very easy to implement an attack that brings you millions, like attackers start with that. However, like simple attacks don't work much anymore for various reasons, mostly because defenses are getting better, but also because users are more educated and it's more difficult to trick them. Phishing attacks will continue. I'm not saying the opposite, but it's more difficult now to trick users into giving their 24 hours or making them signing malicious transaction. Like these things will become more and more difficult because more awareness, more education for users, and so on. And as I said, like sophisticated attacks might enable to extract millions or billions. We might see the first attacks that extract billion. I think it's possible because now attackers are well organized and they invest a lot of money in such attacks. So it's something that we could see in the future. I hope it's not the case, but that would be my prediction. And the last one is around the strategic reserve. I think 2025 will be the year where states will adopt Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, and then there will be like some FOMO cycle where one state starts and the other follow, and we will see this big supply shock that will happen on Bitcoin. Like the number of available Bitcoin is limited. The number of new Bitcoin that come into the market is really, really slow, especially really low, especially after the halving. The number of Bitcoin in exchanges is also small. The number of people that are okay to sell Bitcoin, I think like the supply shock will really happen because there is not, the depth is very limited in terms of selling for the sellers, while the people who will want to buy Bitcoin will be really higher, especially if you put nation state in this equation. So I think this is something that will happen in 2025.
I'm gonna summarize in a couple of ways here. One, I'm not gonna ask you to make a price prediction, but you did just predict state adoption, state FOMO, and supply shock. So without a price prediction, we'll leave it at that. Price predictions are idiotic, but if that happens, we all know what happens. The other is, I feel like this is an appropriate moment for me to say, this program is brought to you by Ledger Enterprise, Ledger's enterprise solution, because if you are an institution or a group of people and not an individual, you need...
Or a nation state.
Yeah, or a nation state. You need Ledger Enterprise, because also what Charles just said is we could see the first $1 billion crypto hack, which would likely be on an institution. And we know that there are a lot of institutions out there who are protecting their assets with Ledger's retail product, which is an incredible product for an individual, and it is the top of the line security, like, you know, nothing compares to it for an individual. But if you are, an organization and you need governance, then you need Ledger Enterprise. So shameless plug for Ledger Enterprise based on Charles's predictions. Don't say we didn't warn you is maybe the other way to put it. Seth, what are your predictions for 2025?
Well, I'll start with I think a big one. I believe the U.S. will pass pro-crypto legislation. I'm going to hedge it a little bit. 25 or 26. I think before the midterm elections in the U.S. It will be introduced in 25. I'll say that confidently. I think it would likely focus around stablecoin and market structure regulation. Market structure referring to really centralized exchange regulation. But I'm also going to predict that bill will specifically recognize the right to self-custody in the U.S. for the first time. I certainly am going to do everything in my power to make that happen. So I'll start there. That could be sort of coupled with or paired with or run alongside a Bitcoin strategic reserve bill that Charles just mentioned. And I totally agree on his assessment. I think, once that happens, that's really the game theory at work, right? The world, the nations of the world can sort of ignore El Salvador adopting Bitcoin, just based solely on size. The world could not ignore the U.S. Adopting Bitcoin at scale, right? Then the race is really on. That could have really wild results, I think, as Charles suggested. I believe the incoming administration is serious about Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. There's some questions remain about the mechanism of doing that, whether it would be actual, purchases of Bitcoin by the federal government, or sort of other ways to accumulate it. First and foremost, not selling it, as the U.S. government is doing foolishly right now. That will stop. So that's sort of the table stakes. But then there are other ways that the government could incentivize sort of paying taxes in Bitcoin through a preferential tax rate if it's paid in Bitcoin, to sort of fill the reserves that way. There are some other sort of incentive-based mechanisms that could be employed to sort of fill the Bitcoin reserve aside from outright purchases. But it could also just be straight-up purchases. We'll see how that legislation comes out. Another prediction, this is probably a pretty safe one. I think all of the Biden era litigation and enforcement against particularly reputable Web3 companies will go away. It will either be dropped or sort of quietly settled. Similarly, I think most of the remaining Biden era anti-crypto regulatory proposals will either be withdrawn or allowed to die in court. Many of them already have died in court, and those things will be largely a direct result of personnel changes at the federal agencies, and that will start happening on January 20th. We've already seen a number of cabinet level appointees, many of which are vocally and publicly pro crypto. One of the things that we're hearing about the chair of the SEC that has yet to be named, but the one comment that the transition team has stated about that role is that the person will be pro crypto. That's a requirement to be considered. So I think the first thing that we'll see is that a lot of the overt hostility of the current administration will really vanish on Inauguration Day, and that will come about through personnel changes. It always takes longer to sort of start up the legislative and regulatory process, so that won't be a first 100 days thing. I think the earliest we'd really see movement there is sort of over the summer, most likely probably into sort of September of 2025 would be my guess as to when those sorts of things really sort of pick up momentum.
And who do you think follows the U.S. and who doesn't follow the U.S. next year globally?
So yeah, great question, and it's actually one of my next predictions. I was just over in Brussels, and there's a lot of talk in Brussels right now about European competitiveness and sort of losing its edge in innovation and technology. A former chair of the ECB, Mario Draghi, published a report in the fall that was extremely critical of Europe's sort of regulatory approach to tech in general and how that has been stifling economic growth and causing Europe to sort of fall behind the U.S. and Asian economies. And while I think that the Draghi report is the correct diagnosis, it offers the wrong prescription. So instead of recommending the obvious solution here, which is to first stop piling on additional regulations, but really, if you want to make your economy vibrant again, you've got to cut back a lot of the regulatory obstacles that exist today. And that's not what the Draghi report called for. Instead, it called for basically more state subsidization of the tech sector. So, EU member states borrowing up to 800 billion additional public debt per year to fund subsidy programs, for example.
Was it Reagan who said if it moves, tax it? If it keeps moving, regulate it. If it stops moving, subsidize it. Do I have that right?
Yeah, so that was one of my favorite Reagan quotes, speaking about the U.S. regulatory state in the 1980s. But he was saying that the approach was, if it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. If it stops moving, subsidize it. And I've joked about this before, but that should really be the motto of the EU. They took that to heart in the worst possible way. And that sort of leads to my prediction. My prediction is that while there's a lot of talk of competitiveness and some FOMO going on, particularly with respect to crypto regulation with the incoming Trump administration, my prediction is that Europe will not read the room. They will not sort of recognize that the right thing to do here is to deregulate to make themselves more competitive. At best, there will be a momentary pause in terms of piling on new regulation, but then my prediction is that will resume again, probably not in 25, but a bit later into the new 5-year mandate. The UK remains interesting in that they say all the right things and then don't do them, but they still have the opportunity. This happened under the former Tory government, where they said they wanted to make the UK a global crypto hub, and announced some sort of flashy, sort of gimmicky things to do that, like a national NFT that was later scrapped. What they failed to do was to actually require their regulatory agencies to sort of live up to the ambition. And so there was a disconnect between what the government was saying and then what the regulators were doing. That still exists today, even with the new Labour government is increasingly talking about competitiveness and harnessing new technologies and innovative sectors to promote growth. Which again is the correct diagnosis. What remains to be seen is whether they'll actually sort of force the regulatory agencies to get on board with that program. That hasn't happened in the past. It could. I'm hopeful that it does, but the verdict is still out on that one.
Got it. These are great. This is like I said at the beginning, really an exciting moment. I feel like we've worked pretty hard to get here. This is Ledger's 10th anniversary. We've had really basically the same mission and message for those 10 years, which is a belief in self-custody and knowing that if self-custody, then security, and providing the tools for that. Now with the scale of the market cap, that becomes ever more important. In the scale of what we protect in total. I love having you guys here because you're both two faces of what it is we're fighting for. We're fighting for that mission of security, self-custody, but also other things that we believe in as individuals and as a company, like privacy, right to choice, these sorts of things. And it really is a great moment to be a part of this, and it's truly a pleasure to do this job with the two of you. So thanks for joining me and sharing your thoughts, and we'll do it again next year, if not before.
Ian, one more prediction for 2025. I'm going to bring you back to DC. We're going to do some more rounds on the Hill and continue to evangelize self-custody and why it's important. I think our moment has arrived.
I love it. I'm ready. You say the word and I'll be there. Thanks, guys.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining us for the special end of the year podcast. We hope you enjoyed our look back at 2024 and our predictions for 2025. If you like this episode, please hit like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. because your support means the world to us. Here's to an exciting 2025 ahead. Happy holidays. Until next time, stay secure.